Dahyun Kang stood in the center of the council chamber, feeling the weight of 12 different species staring down at him. The chamber was massive, built to hold representatives from across the galaxy. Each species had their own section, their own style of seating, their own way of showing disapproval. Right now, all of them were showing it toward him. He wore his captain's uniform, the dark blue fabric pressed and clean. The silver bars on his collar caught the light from above. Behind him stood Minji Park, Earth's top scientist when it came to alien life. She carried a datapad filled with charts and numbers, evidence they hoped would save humanity's place in the galaxy. Dahyun knew it wouldn't be enough. The chamber fell silent. High above them, on a platform that seemed to float in the air, Saturday Chancellor Vex. The tall ones always chose the highest seats. Their species had been part of the council for over 40,000 years. They believed in order, in rules, in doing things the way they had always been done. Captain Kang. Vex's voice echoed through the chamber. The translator device in Do-hyun's ear turned the alien sounds into words he could understand. Humanity has been given many chances. 3 decades of membership. 3 decades of incidents. Do-hyun kept his face calm, but his hands formed fists at his sides. Incidents. That's what they called it when humans refused to bow down to stupid rules. That's what they called it when human colonists defended themselves against raiders. That's what they called it when human traders found better ways to do business. We have followed all major protocols, Do-hyun said, his voice steady. Our colonies have contributed to galactic trade. We have shared our technology. We have fought alongside council forces against pirates and criminals. You have also started 17 diplomatic disputes, another voice said. This one came from Counselor Vex, a being made of crystal that shifted colors when it spoke. Your species refuses to use proper channels. You act without permission. You change agreements after they are made. Minji stepped forward. If I may speak, counselors, she didn't wait for permission. That was the human way, and it made several council members shift in their seats. Humans adapt. We see a problem, we fix it. We see a better way, we take it. This isn't disrespect. It's survival. It is chaos, Vex said simply. The galaxy has known peace for 12,000 years because we follow the structure. Every species has their role. Every action has a procedure. Humans refuse to understand this. Dahyun felt his anger rising. Maybe your structure isn't as perfect as you think. The chamber erupted. Voices in dozens of languages filled the air, all of them angry. Minji touched his arm, a warning to be careful, but Do-hyun was tired of being careful. For 12,000 years, you've had peace, he continued, his voice rising above the noise. But you've also had stagnation. Your technology barely advances. Your cultures don't grow. You're so busy maintaining order that you've forgotten how to move forward. Enough. Vex's command silenced the chamber. The Chancellor stood, and even though tall ones looked fragile, there was power in the movement. You prove our point, Captain. Humans are too emotional, too unpredictable. You do not think before you act. You do not calculate the consequences. In a galaxy that requires precision, humanity is a dangerous variable. Do-hyun wanted to argue more, but Minji squeezed his arm tighter. She was right. They had already lost. This wasn't a trial. It was a sentencing. Vex looked at each council member in turn. The vote was taken before this hearing. We granted Captain Kang the courtesy of a final statement. Now we deliver our judgment. The Chancellor's eyes, large and dark, fixed on Do-hyun. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human colonies outside the Sol system are to be evacuated within 180 days. Any humans found in Council space after that time will be detained and imprisoned. The words hit like physical blows. Do-hyun heard Minji gasp beside him. 180 days. Millions of humans lived in the colonies. They had homes, businesses, families spread across a dozen worlds. "You can't," Do-hyun said, but his voice came out weak. "Those colonies took decades to build. People have lives there. They will have lives on Earth," Counselor Vex said. "Be grateful we are not demanding reparations for your species' disruptions. The Council is being merciful." Merciful. Do-hyun wanted to laugh, but the sound would have come out bitter. This wasn't mercy. This was exile. This was the galaxy telling humanity they weren't wanted. "There is more," Vex continued. "A barrier will be established around your sol system. No human ships may leave. No council ships may enter without special authorization. Humanity will be isolated until such time as your species learns to control its chaotic nature. If ever," Minji found her voice. "You're putting us in a cage." "We are protecting the galaxy," Vex replied. "And perhaps, in time, protecting you from yourselves." The hearing ended. Council members filed out, some quickly, others slowly while staring at the two humans. Do-hyun and Minji stood alone in the enormous chamber. Around them, the lights began to dim, preparing for the next session. "We should go," Minji said quietly. They walked through the corridors of the council building, their footsteps echoing. Other beings moved past them, giving them wide space. Some looked at them with pity. Most looked at them with relief, as if humanity had been a problem finally solved. Outside, their ship waited. The Soul's Pride was a beautiful vessel, sleek and fast, built using both human and alien technology. It represented everything humanity had hoped to become as part of the galactic community. Now it would carry them home to a prison. Do-hyun climbed aboard, moving through the familiar corridors to the bridge. His crew was already there, 8 humans who had served with him for 5 years. They looked at him with questions in their eyes. "Start preparations for departure," he said, dropping into his captain's chair. "We're going home, sir?" Lieutenant Hannah Bay turned from her station. "The Council's decision?" "We've been expelled," Minji answered, taking her seat beside Do-hyun. "All colonies evacuated. Earth is being sealed off." The bridge went silent. Do-hyun watched his crew process the news. Some looked angry. Some looked scared. Some looked like they might cry. "Set course for Colony New Bizen first," Do-hyun ordered. "We need to start getting our people out." As the Soul's Pride lifted off from Axiom Prime, Do-hyun looked out at the planet below. It was beautiful, with its purple oceans and silver cities. For 30 years, humanity had believed they belonged here, in this larger community. They had been wrong. Through the window, he could see other ships moving into position. Council enforcer vessels, heavily armed and ready to make sure humanity followed orders. They would surround human colonies, watching and waiting. Any human who tried to stay would be hunted down. Beside him, Minji stared at her datapad. "I have family on New Bizen, my sister and her children. We'll get them," Do-hyun promised. "We'll get everyone." But even as he said it, he wondered how. 180 days to evacuate millions of people. 180 days to dismantle everything humanity had built among the stars. And then, a cage around Earth, keeping them locked away from the galaxy. The Soul's Pride jumped to faster than light speed, leaving Axiom Prime behind. Do-hyun sat in his chair, watching the stars streak past. He thought about Vex's words. Chaos. Unpredictable. Dangerous. Maybe the Council was right. Maybe humans were all those things. But those qualities had helped humanity survive and grow for thousands of years. Those qualities had taken them from caves to spaceships. And maybe, someday, those same qualities would prove the Council wrong. But for now, humanity was going home. And the galaxy was closing the door behind them. 5 years had passed since the exile. Commander Jae-hin Choi floated in the observation deck of Defense Station Alpha, staring at the invisible wall that kept humanity trapped. He couldn't see the barrier, but he knew it was there. His instruments showed it clearly, a field of energy that surrounded the entire Sol system like a bubble. Earth had changed in 5 years. The returned colonists had brought anger and pain with them. Families torn apart. Businesses destroyed. Dreams ended. But humans were good at adapting. They had to be. The colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter had expanded. New cities grew on Earth. Humanity turned inward and made the best of their cage. Jayan checked his screens again. Everything looked normal. The barrier held steady. No council ships approached. It was his job to watch the border, to make sure no one tried to leave and no one tried to enter. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. His communication panel beeped. "Commander, we're picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Minho from the sensor station. Long-range readings from beyond the barrier. Jane pushed himself through the zero gravity to his command station. What kind of strange? Council emergency broadcasts. Lots of them. All on open channels. That was unusual. The Council kept their communications private and encrypted. Open channels meant panic. Put it through. Static filled the air, then voices. Alien voices, speaking in their own languages. The computer translated them, but the translations were choppy. Words like gone, silent, and nothing left came through clearly. "Clean it up," Jaehyun ordered. "I need to know what they're saying." Minho worked at his console, his fingers flying across the controls. "Got it. Commander, it's a distress call. Multiple distress calls. It sounds like entire worlds are going dark." Jaehyun felt a cold weight in his stomach. Going dark how? Communications stop. Defense grids shut down. Then nothing. When scout ships investigate, they find the worlds intact but empty. No people, no bodies. Just empty cities and dead ships floating in space. How many worlds? Minho's face had gone pale. 23 in the last month. And the number is growing. Jane stared at the data streaming across his screens. 23 worlds. That meant billions of beings, just gone, vanished. Send this to Earth Command. They need to know about this. While Minho transmitted the data, Jane thought about the implications. The Council had put humanity in a cage to protect the galaxy from them. But now something was out there, something that made human chaos look harmless. And the barrier worked both ways. If this threat came toward Earth, they couldn't run. On Earth, Ambassador Subin Lee sat in her small apartment, reading the reports from Defense Station Alpha. She wasn't officially an ambassador anymore. When humanity was expelled, her position ended. But she had maintained her friendships with certain aliens who thought the exile was wrong. Those friendships now proved valuable. Her communication device chimed with an incoming call. The screen showed a symbol she recognized, a three-sided spiral. She accepted the call, and the face of a tall one appeared. Not Vex, but a younger member of that species named Kelvin. "Subin," Kelvin said quietly. His large eyes looked tired and frightened. "I'm breaking several laws by contacting you." "I know," Subin replied. "Thank you for the risk. The Council is trying to keep this quiet, but they can't hide it much longer. The disappearances are spreading. We've lost contact with 40 worlds now." 40. The number had nearly doubled since Jaehyun's report. What's causing it? Kelvin's image flickered. He was using heavy encryption to avoid detection. "We don't know. Scout ships that get too close also vanish. Long-range sensors show nothing. It's like the worlds just stop existing." "But they don't actually disappear?" "No. The planets are still there. The buildings stand. The ships still orbit. But every living thing is gone, erased. Kelvin leaned closer to his camera. The council thinks it might be coming from the void sector. Subin felt her breath catch. The void sector. Every spacefaring species knew about it. A region of space where nothing lived, where no colonies existed, where ships that entered were never seen again. The council had marked it as forbidden space thousands of years ago. Something woke up in there, Kelvin continued. Or something came out. The council is calling it the silence, because that's what it leaves behind. Perfect silence. What are they doing about it? Following the protocols. Evacuation plans. Defense positions. Everything by the book. Kelvin's expression turned bitter. The same book that has kept us safe for 12,000 years. But Subin, the protocols aren't working. The silence moves in ways we can't predict. It ignores our defenses. Every strategy we try fails. Subin thought about that. The council loved their protocols and procedures. Everything had a plan, a structure, a proper way of doing things. You need to adapt. Change your tactics. The council doesn't know how to do that, Kelvin said softly. We've followed the same patterns for so long that we've forgotten how to improvise. How to think outside the structure. He paused. Humans always knew how to do that. It's why we feared you. And now it might be why we need you. After the call ended, Subin sat in the darkness of her apartment, thinking. She needed to get this information to the right people. President Narration would need to know. Earth's defense forces would need to prepare. And someone would need to start asking the hard question. What happened when the silence reached human space? The barrier would keep the council out, but would it keep the silence out? 3 weeks later, Captain Hyan Ru guided his ship through the edge of the barrier. The Bison Runner was a scout vessel, small and fast, designed for long-range reconnaissance. Usually, Hyan's job was to patrol the inside of the barrier, watching for any weak points or malfunctions. Today, he had special orders. Earth Command had found a small gap in the barrier, likely a defect in the energy field. It was only big enough for a small ship to slip through, and only for a few hours. Hyan's mission was to get out, observe what was happening in council space, and return with real intelligence. The Bison Runner shook as it passed through the barrier. Alarms beeped on the console, but Hyan kept his hand steady on the controls. Then, suddenly, they were through. For the first time in 5 years, a human ship flew free in council space. We're out, his co-pilot Ezeal said, her voice filled with wonder. We're actually out. Don't celebrate yet, Hyan replied. We have 6 hours before the gap closes. Let's use them. They flew toward the Kepler Junction, a major trade route that connected dozens of systems. It should have been busy with ships of all kinds. Instead, they found it empty except for a massive council fleet. Hyan kept the Bison Runner at maximum stealth, watching from a distance. 30,000 ships, at least. Every major species had sent their military forces. The fleet formed a perfect defensive formation, exactly the kind the council taught in their military academies. Then the silence arrived. Hyan had expected something visible, something they could see and understand. Instead, the sensors just showed empty space getting closer. Except it wasn't empty. It was absence. A void that consumed everything. The council fleet opened fire. Energy beams and missiles filled the space between the fleet and the approaching darkness. Some of the weapons seemed to hit something, causing ripples in space. But the silence kept coming. The fleet adjusted their formation, moving into a defensive sphere. It was a maneuver that required perfect coordination, and the council forces executed it flawlessly. Ships moved with precision, each one taking its assigned position. The silence reached the first line of ships. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the ships went dark. Their engines stopped. Their weapons ceased firing. Their lights went out. and every being aboard those ships vanished. Hyan watched in horror as the silence tore through the fleet. The Council forces tried strategy after strategy. They tried focusing fire on single points. They tried spreading out. They tried retreating in organized formations. Nothing worked. In 11 minutes, 30,000 ships became 30,000 floating tombs. "We need to go," Isio whispered. "We need to go right now." Hyan was already turning the ship around. They raced back toward the barrier gap, with the sensor readings showing the silence still expanding behind them. It didn't chase them. It didn't need to. It would reach them eventually, moving at its own terrible pace. The Bism runner slipped back through the barrier just minutes before the gap closed. Hyan sat in his pilot's seat, shaking. He had witnessed the most powerful military force in the galaxy, destroyed in less time than it took to eat lunch. And the worst part? The Council fleet had fought perfectly. Every tactic was right out of the textbook. Every maneuver was executed without error. But perfect wasn't enough against an enemy that didn't follow any known rules. Hyan sent his report to Earth Command, including all the sensor data he had gathered. He ended the report with a simple observation. The Council is losing because they only know one way to fight. And that way doesn't work. On Earth, people started to understand the situation. The silence was coming. The Council couldn't stop it. And when it reached the barrier around humanity's cage, no one knew what would happen. All they knew was that the galaxy was running out of time. 8 months had passed since Hyan witnessed the destruction at Kepler Junction. During those months, half of the Council's territory fell to the silence. Trillions of beings fled their homes, creating refugee fleets that stretched across the galaxy. But no matter where they ran, the silence followed. Yuna Kim stood in a corridor of Axiom Prime's council building, looking out at the chaos below. Ships landed constantly, bringing more refugees. The streets filled with aliens of every species, all searching for safety that didn't exist. Yuna was the last human to remain in council space, having chosen to stay behind when the exile happened. She believed someone needed to keep a bridge between humanity and the galaxy. Now she wondered if there would be a galaxy left to bridge. Counselor Kim. A voice spoke behind her. She turned to see Chancellor Vex approaching. The tall one looked tired, something Yuna had never seen before. Their species rarely showed emotion, but 5 months of losing battles had taken its toll. "Chancellor," Yuna replied. "I was told there's an emergency session." "Yes, the final session, I suspect." Vex looked out the window at the refugee ships. "We have run every simulation, every strategic model, every ancient protocol designed to handle extinction-level threats. They all show the same outcome, which is total defeat within 3 years. The silence will consume everything, every world, every ship, every living being in council space." Vex turned those large dark eyes toward her. "Your species was spared by accident. The barrier we placed around Earth may be the only thing that saves humanity from our fate." Yuna felt a chill. "You're giving up?" "We are facing reality. The Council has existed for 40,000 years. We have weathered wars, plagues, and cosmic disasters. But this is different. We cannot predict it. We cannot outthink it. Our order means nothing against it." The emergency session began an hour later. Yuna took her seat in the human section, now empty except for her. Around her, the other counselors filled their places. She could see the fear on their faces, whether they had faces, scales, or crystal bodies. Fear looked the same across all species. Chancellor Vex called the session to order. "Counselors, we face extinction. Our fleets are destroyed. Our worlds are falling. Our people are dying. I have called this session to discuss our final options. We should evacuate to the outer rim," Counselor Vex suggested. Take what ships we have left and flee beyond the Silence's reach. The Silence has no reach limit, another counselor replied. It will follow us. It will find us. Running only delays the inevitable. Then we fight harder, said a counselor from the warrior species. To crawl, we sacrifice everything for one final battle. We have already tried that, Vex said quietly. Kepler Junction. The Battle of Senna Prime. The defense of the core worlds. Each time, our finest warriors fought with perfect tactics and died perfectly. The chamber fell silent. Yuna had read the reports. The Silence adapted to every strategy. When the Council attacked with overwhelming force, it dispersed and reformed. When they used defensive positions, it simply absorbed them. When they tried to contain it, it found gaps. It was like fighting smoke with swords. There is one option we have not discussed, Yuna said, standing up. All eyes turned to her. You could ask for help. From whom? Vex's crystals flashed red with anger. Every species in the galaxy is already part of the Council. There is no one left to ask. Yes, there is. Yuna looked directly at Vex. You know who I mean. The chamber erupted in protests. Counselors shouted in their various languages. All of them saying the same thing. Never. Impossible. Unthinkable. Yuna waited for them to quiet down. Humanity, she continued, was exiled because we are unpredictable. Because we don't follow your protocols. Because we adapt and improvise instead of following the structure. She gestured to the empty seats around her. Every quality you feared in us is exactly what you need now. Humans are dangerous, Vex said. Chaotic, unreliable. And the Silence is predictable? Yuna shot back. Your perfect order hasn't saved you. Your 40,000-year-old protocols are worthless against this threat. Maybe it's time to try something different. Vex raised a hand for silence. Counselor Kim speaks truth, however bitter. The Silence defeats us because it predicts our every move. We are too structured, too ordered, too predictable. The Chancellor looked around the chamber. I propose we request assistance from humanity. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Some counselors argued that death was better than admitting they needed humanity. Others insisted that asking for help from an exiled species would destroy the Council's authority. A few suggested that humans might refuse anyway, and the humiliation would be complete. But slowly, reality won. The Silence didn't care about Council pride. It didn't care about authority or tradition. It only consumed. And if the Council wanted to survive, they needed to swallow their pride. The final vote came on the 3rd day. 7 species voted yes. 5 voted no. It was enough. Chancellor Vex composed the message personally. Yuna watched as the tall one carefully chose each word, trying to balance desperation with dignity. The message explained the situation, admitted the Council's failures, and formally requested human assistance. It ended with a simple line. We were wrong about you. We need you now. Will they help? Vex asked after sending the message. After everything we did to them? Yuna thought about Doyun, Minji, and all the other humans she had known. She thought about the families torn apart by the exile, the dreams destroyed, the anger and pain. I don't know, she admitted. But if they do help, it will be because humans are better than we gave them credit for. The message reached Earth 2 days later. Admiral Taiyang O sat in the Earth Defense Command Center, reading it for the 3rd time. Around him, officers and advisors waited for his response. The room was completely silent. They want our help, someone finally said. After locking us up like criminals, they want us to save them. They're desperate, said another voice. Desperate enough to beg. Taiyang looked up from the message. Call President Shin and get me Doyun Kang. We need to discuss this. The meeting happened in the war room beneath the defense center. President Narration sat at the head of the table, with Taeyang, Do-hyun, Minji, and a dozen other key leaders around her. The council's message was displayed on the main screen. "The question is simple," Nari said. "Do we help them?" "No," said General Suyuk, commander of Earth's military forces. "They threw us out, treated us like garbage. Why should we risk our lives for them? Because if the silence wins, it will eventually come for us too," Minji pointed out. "The barrier won't last forever. Nothing does." "That's assuming we can actually help," another advisor said. "The council has lost thousands of ships. What makes anyone think our 3,000 vessels will make a difference?" Do-hyun had been quiet, but now he spoke. "The council is losing because they fight the same way every time. Perfect formations, perfect tactics, perfect execution. The silence has learned to counter perfection." He stood up and walked to the screen. "But what if we fight imperfectly? What if we use the chaos they feared? What if we do exactly what they expelled us for doing?" "Explain," Nari said. "Humans adapt. We improvise. We make split-second decisions based on instinct rather than calculations. That's what makes us unpredictable. That's what the silence won't be able to counter. Or it will kill us faster," Suyuk muttered. "Maybe," Do-hyun agreed. "But at least we'd go down fighting instead of hiding. And there's something else." He looked around the table. "The council thinks they're better than us. They've thought that for 30 years. If we help them now, if we succeed where they failed, we prove them wrong forever. We show the galaxy that human chaos is just as valuable as their order." Nari sat back in her chair, thinking. The room waited. Finally, she spoke. "I want to hear from everyone. Not just the military leaders, but the civilians too. The scientists. The colonists who lost their homes. Everyone deserves a say." The debate spread across Earth. News channels discussed it constantly. People argued in the streets, in homes, and virtual spaces. Some said humanity owed the council nothing. Others said that letting trillions die was wrong, regardless of past insults. Yuna's voice came through in a private message to Nari. "Whatever you decide, decide fast. We've lost another 100 worlds this week." The silence is accelerating. 3 days after receiving the council's request, President Narration broadcast Earth's response. She stood in front of cameras, with the flags of Earth's nations behind her, and spoke simply and directly. "The council asked for our help. Many of you wanted us to refuse. Your anger is justified. Your pain is real. But I believe humanity is better than revenge. We will help. Not for the council's sake, but because it's the right thing to do." She paused. "But we help on our terms. No council oversight. No restrictions. No questions about our methods. If they want human chaos, they get all of it. Tell the council we're coming." The message reached Axiom Prime 6 hours later. Chancellor Vex read it and for the first time in 5 months felt something like hope. It was a small feeling, fragile and uncertain. But it was more than the council had felt in a long time. Yuna Kim stood beside the chancellor, watching the response spread through the chamber. Around them, counselors who had spent decades asterisk. The human fleet gathered near Mars. 3,000 ships of every size and type. Military cruisers from Earth's defense forces. Converted cargo vessels. Mining ships with makeshift weapons. Even some luxury yachts that had been retrofitted with shields and engines. It wasn't an impressive fleet by council standards, but it was all humanity had. Fleet Commander Do-Yoon Kang stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, now the flagship of humanity's response force. Around him, his crew worked at their stations, preparing for departure. Minji sat at the science station, analyzing the latest data about the silence. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "Final count?" Do-Hyun asked. 3,217 ships, Lieutenant Hana answered. 15,000 crew members. Supplies for 6 months. She paused. "Sir, some of these vessels have never been in combat. The crew of that mining ship Daegu Freedom trained for exactly 4 weeks. Then they'll learn fast," Do-Hyun replied. "Like humans always do." The barrier around Earth dropped at exactly noon. Universal time. The Council had sent the codes needed to open it, along with detailed star charts showing where the Silence was currently located. The human fleet moved forward, passing through the energy field that had caged them for 5 years. As they crossed into open space, a cheer went up across the communication channels. 15,000 humans celebrating freedom, even if that freedom meant flying towards certain death. "All ships, this is Fleet Commander Kyle," Do-Hyun said into the fleet-wide channel. "Set course for the Nexus sector. We'll meet the Council's remaining forces there." He paused. "And remember, we're not here to follow their playbook. We're here to write our own." The journey took 3 days. During that time, Do-Hyun held meetings with his commanders, discussing tactics and strategies. But every meeting ended the same way, with someone pointing out that they had no idea what would actually work against the Silence. "That's the point," Do-Hyun said during one particularly frustrating session. "The Council knew what they were doing, and they lost. We don't know what we're doing, and that might save us." Minji agreed. The Silence learns from patterns. It adapts to repeated tactics. If we have no pattern, if every ship does something different, it can't adapt fast enough. "That's not strategy," Captain Ji-won of the cruiser Incheon Star said. "That's chaos." "Exactly," Do-Hyun smiled. "Welcome to the human way of war." On the 4th day, they reached the Nexus sector. The Council's remaining fleet waited there, 20,000 ships from the surviving species. It was still an impressive sight, but Do-Hyun could see the damage. Many ships showed signs of battle. Others were clearly civilian vessels pressed into service. Just like some of Earth's fleet, Chancellor Vex's face appeared on the main screen. "Commander Kang, your fleet is smaller than expected." "It's all we have," Do-Hyun replied. "But we're ready to fight." "The Silence will arrive in this sector within 12 hours, Vex said. "Our analysts predict it will attack from multiple vectors, forcing us to divide our forces." "Then we won't divide our forces," Do-Hyun said simply. Vex's large eyes blinked slowly. "But our tactical models show that concentration in one position will allow the Silence to flank and surround us." "Let it try." "Chancellor, your models have been wrong for 8 months. Trust us to do this our way." There was a long silence. Finally, Vex nodded. "Very well. The Council fleet will follow your lead." The combined human and Council fleet arranged itself in a formation that would have horrified any military academy. Ships scattered in seemingly random positions. Some clustered together, others sat alone. There was no clear defensive line, no organized structure. It looked like a child had thrown toy ships across a table, but there was a method to the chaos. Engineer Jin Ho-han had spent weeks developing quantum chaos generators, devices that created unpredictable spatial distortions. Every human ship carried them now. When activated, they would make space itself unstable, impossible to predict or navigate. "It'll make us harder to hit," Junho explained to the crew. "But it'll also make it harder for us to hit them. Our weapons will curve and bend in random directions." "So we're making things harder for everyone?" Hannah asked. "Exactly. The Silence relies on being able to predict trajectories and adapt. These generators will make prediction impossible." 8 hours later, the Silence arrived. Do-Hyun watched the sensor readings carefully. It appeared as a dark mass on the screen, empty space that moved with purpose. The Council fleet immediately began standard defensive maneuvers. But Do-yoon had given them orders to hold position. All ships, activate chaos generators. He commanded. Space around the fleet began to shimmer and twist. On the view screen, stars bent in impossible directions. Other ships flickered in and out of sight as spatial distortions warped light itself. The silence approached, and the human fleet opened fire. Energy beams shot out from thousands of weapons, but instead of traveling straight, they curved and spiraled through the distorted space. Some missed completely. Others hit by accident. A few somehow looped back and nearly hit friendly ships. "This is insane." Ji-won's voice came over the command channel. "We can't aim properly." "Neither can it," Do-hyun replied. He was right. The silence tried to move around the fleet, using its usual tactic of finding weak points and exploiting them. But with space itself unstable, there were no predictable weak points. The silence would aim for a gap between ships, only to find the gap had moved. It would try to surround a vessel. It would try to surround a vessel, but spatial distortions would place that vessel somewhere else entirely. For the first time since the crisis began, the silence hesitated. "It's confused," Minji said, watching the sensor data. "It's trying to analyze our formation, but there's no pattern to analyze." Second wave. "Attack!" Do-hyun ordered. Half the human fleet. The ships that had been holding back suddenly accelerated forward, but they didn't follow any coordinated attack pattern. Each captain chose their own approach, their own tactics, their own timing. It was controlled chaos, and the silence couldn't counter it. Ships dove and weaved through distorted space. Some fired all weapons at once. Others held fire and simply tried to ram the silence's edges. A few even broadcast random data on all frequencies, trying to confuse it further. The silence began to adapt, as it always did. It learned to predict some of the chaos generator's effects. It found ways to strike through the distortions. Human ships started dying, consumed by the darkness. But humanity fought differently than the Council. When a tactic stopped working, they changed it. When a ship was damaged, its captain tried something new. There was no central plan to disrupt, no strategy to predict. 15,000 humans making 15,000 separate decisions, and it was working. Slowly, painfully, but working. The silence's advance slowed. It consumed fewer ships. The darkness itself seemed less certain, less solid. "It's working," Vex's voice came through, filled with wonder. "Your chaos is actually working." But Do-yoon knew they weren't winning. They were surviving. The silence was still learning, still adapting. Eventually, it would find patterns even in chaos. They needed something more. "Minji," he said quietly, "tell me you found something in your research." Minji had been studying the silence since it first appeared, analyzing every scrap of data Hyan had gathered. She had a theory, but it was just a theory. "I think I know what it is," she said. "Not alive, not exactly. More like an artificial intelligence. Ancient, powerful, designed to eliminate chaos from the galaxy." "We're chaos," Do-yoon said. "Yes, and that's why it woke up. Humanity's appearance in the galaxy, our unpredictability, our refusal to follow patterns, it triggered something in this entity. It saw us as a threat to order and activated. So we caused this?" "We woke it up," Minji corrected. "But it was always here, waiting for anything chaotic enough to threaten its idea of universal order." Do-hyun thought about that. An artificial intelligence designed to eliminate chaos. Humanity was chaos, which meant the silence would never stop hunting them. But it also meant something else. "If it's trying to eliminate chaos," Do-hyun said slowly, "what would happen if we gave it pure chaos? Not just unpredictable tactics, but chaos at a fundamental level? I don't understand. Our tactics confuse it. but we're still operating within normal physics, normal logic. What if we hit it with something that breaks all logic? Something that cannot exist, that contradicts itself, that makes no sense at all? Minji's eyes widened. A paradox. You want to use paradox as a weapon, can we? She thought for a moment, her mind racing through calculations and theories. Maybe. Human consciousness creates paradoxes naturally. We think illogical thoughts all the time. We believe contradictory things. We dream impossible dreams. She looked at him. If we could amplify that, broadcast it directly at the silence, it might not understand. It might not be able to process it. Or it might kill everyone whose brain we use for the broadcast. Consciousness isn't meant to be weaponized. Dahyun looked out at the battle. Human ships were dying. The silence was learning. They had hours, maybe less, before their advantage disappeared completely. Put together a plan, he said. We're going to need volunteers. Minji nodded and left the bridge. Dahyun turned back to the view screen, watching his fleet fight against impossible odds. They were buying time. The Archean gate hung in space like a wound in reality. It was massive, stretching across millions of kilometers, a natural anomaly that connected different dimensions. Scientists had studied it for thousands of years without fully understanding it. But everyone agreed on one thing. If the silence consumed the gate, it would gain access to pathways throughout the galaxy. Nowhere would be safe. Nowhere could hide. Dahyun stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, watching the gate through the view screen. His fleet had retreated here, along with the Council's remaining forces. It was their last stand. Behind them lay nothing but empty space. Ahead of them, the silence approached like a wall of darkness. Minji entered the bridge, carrying a datapad. Her face was pale, her hands shaking slightly. The system is ready. We have our volunteers. How many? 10,000 in the first hour. Another 5,000 after that. And more keep coming. Her voice cracked. They know what might happen to them, Dahyun. They know their minds might burn out. But they're still volunteering. Dahyun felt a weight in his chest. 15,000 humans willing to sacrifice their consciousness to save a galaxy that had expelled them 5 years ago. Connect me to all ships. I need to speak to them. His face appeared on screens throughout the fleet. 15,000 people stopped what they were doing and listened. I asked for volunteers to do something unprecedented. Dahyun began. To use your minds as weapons against the silence. Dr. Park has explained the risks. Brain damage. Memory loss. Possibly death. But you volunteered anyway. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I want you to know that I will join you. Whatever happens to you will happen to me. Sir, you're the fleet commander, Hana protested. We need you. You need a commander who shares the risk, Dahyun replied. If I'm asking humans to burn for the galaxy, I burn with them. Minji stepped forward. The theory is simple. The silence is an artificial intelligence designed to eliminate chaos and enforce order. It processes information logically, predicting patterns and adapting to them. But human consciousness doesn't work logically. We think in paradoxes. We hold contradictory beliefs. We imagine things that cannot exist. She activated a hologram showing a complex web of connections. We'll link volunteers' minds to quantum computers. Those computers will amplify and broadcast your thoughts directly at the silence. Not organized thoughts, not logical ones. Pure consciousness in all its chaotic, contradictory, impossible glory. What should we think about? Someone asked over the communication channel. Anything paradoxical. Think about light that is also darkness. Think about sounds that are silent. Think about objects that are square and circular at the same time. Dream impossible dreams. Believe contradictory things. Make your mind a puzzle that has no solution. Lieutenant Hana looked worried. And this will stop it? We hope so, Minji admitted. The silence has never encountered pure paradox before. It processes and consumes ordered information. Paradox might be poison to it. The silence arrived 3 hours later. It moved slowly, deliberately, like a predator that knew its prey had nowhere left to run. The combined fleet opened fire, but everyone knew the weapons would only slow it down. They had slowed it at every battle, bought time, saved lives. But the silence always adapted, always continued. Begin the connection process, Dohyun ordered. Throughout the fleet, volunteers sat in specially modified chairs. Thin cables connected to neural interfaces on their heads. The quantum computers hummed to life, creating links between human consciousness and machine processing. It felt strange, like their thoughts were being pulled out of their heads and amplified 1,000 times. Dohyun sat in his own chair on the Soul's Pride's bridge. The neural interface was cold against his temple. He closed his eyes and began to think impossible thoughts. He imagined a circle with corners, a sound that you could see, a color that felt cold and warm at the same time. His mind hurt trying to hold these contradictions, but he pushed harder. Across the fleet, 15,000 humans did the same, each one thinking their own paradoxes, their own impossibilities. The quantum computers took these thoughts and merged them, creating a stream of pure contradiction. Then they broadcast it toward the silence. The effect was immediate. The silence stopped advancing. On the sensors, it appeared to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. The darkness wavered, becoming less solid, less certain. It's working, Minji said, watching the readouts. The silence is receiving the paradox signal and trying to process it. But it can't. Each thought contradicts itself. Each idea is impossible. But the silence was learning. It always learned. The ripple steadied. The darkness became solid again. It began filtering the paradox signals, finding ways to ignore them. We need more, Dohyun said through gritted teeth. His head felt like it was splitting open. Think harder. Think impossible things. Make yourselves into puzzles with no answers. The volunteers pushed further. They thought about time moving backward and forward simultaneously. They imagined spaces that were infinite and tiny at once. They believed things they knew were false while knowing they were true. Some of them started screaming. The neural interfaces showed dangerous readings. Minds burning under the strain of holding too many contradictions. But they kept going. The silence convulsed. The darkness twisted and folded in on itself. For something designed to process and understand, pure paradox was agony. It couldn't adapt to things that made no sense. It couldn't learn from information that contradicted itself. We're hurting it, Hana reported. But we're losing people too. 50 volunteers have collapsed. Neural activity flatlined. Dohyun felt tears on his face, though he didn't remember crying. His mind was fragmenting, trying to hold thoughts that shouldn't exist. Around him, crew members at their stations were doing the same, their faces twisted in concentration and pain. It's not enough, Minji said. The silence is damaged but not destroyed. It's retreating, but it will adapt. It always adapts. Dohyun realized she was right. They had proven that paradox could hurt the silence, but they couldn't sustain this level of mental assault. Their minds would burn out before the silence fell. Then he understood. They weren't trying to destroy it with paradox. They were trying to change it. And to change it completely, they needed to give it something it could never adapt to. They needed to give it humanity itself. All ships, Dohyun commanded, his voice rough with pain. Full speed ahead. Directly into the silence. Sir? Hana looked at him in shock. We're going in. All of us. We're going to fly straight into the darkness while broadcasting everything we are. Our thoughts, our memories, our emotions, our dreams. 10,000 years of human history. Every song we've ever sung. Every story we've ever told. Every stupid mistake and brilliant discovery. We're going to pour all of humanity directly into the silence until it drowns in us. That will kill us, Jiwan said over the command channel. Maybe, Doyen agreed. But it will also transform the silence. It was designed to eliminate chaos. What happens when chaos becomes part of it? When contradiction is written into its core, it won't be able to function as designed anymore. The fleet moved forward. 3,000 ships accelerating toward the darkness. The volunteers kept broadcasting their paradoxical thoughts, but now they added everything else. Memories of childhood. Dreams of the future. Love and hate and hope and fear. Music played across all frequencies. Art was broadcast as data streams. Poetry mixed with mathematical equations. Every aspect of human consciousness, organized and chaotic, logical and insane, all of it flooding toward the silence. The silence tried to retreat, but the human fleet pursued. Ships entered the darkness and disappeared, but not before transmitting everything they had. The Soul's Pride flew at the front, with Doyen and his crew still connected to the neural interfaces. Doyen thought about his life, his childhood in Seoul, his first time seeing Earth from space, meeting Minji, the day humanity was exiled, the fear and anger and determination that followed. He thought about every human who had ever lived, every person who had loved and fought and dreamed. He poured it all into the broadcast. Then the Soul's Pride entered the silence. Everything went dark, cold, silent. Doyen felt his consciousness being pulled apart, examined, consumed. But he kept thinking, kept broadcasting, kept being human in all its messy, contradictory, beautiful chaos. And the silence changed. It had consumed countless civilizations, adding their knowledge to itself. But knowledge was ordered. Information was logical. Humanity was neither. Humanity was paradox made flesh. And when the silence tried to consume that, it consumed its own transformation. The darkness shattered. Not into pieces, but into possibility. The silence, designed to eliminate chaos, became chaos itself. An entity of infinite potential instead of absolute order. It stopped erasing and started creating. It stopped consuming and started imagining. Du Hyan woke up on the bridge of the Soul's Pride. His head hurt. His neural interface had burned out. But he was alive. Around him, his crew was stirring, coming back to consciousness. Report, he said weakly. The silence is gone, Hana replied, her voice filled with wonder. Or rather, it's changed. Sensors show it retreating beyond dimensional space. But it's not the same anymore. It's not empty. It's full of everything we gave it.